Welcome to our channel Imam Ali's Legacy. Our channel aims to shed light on the invaluable lessons and guidance imparted by Imam Ali, covering a wide range of topics including spirituality, leadership, justice, morality, and philosophy. Through detailed explanations, reflections, and insightful interpretations, we bring Imam Ali's words to life, helping you connect with his divine wisdom in today's world. Whether you're seeking spiritual growth, intellectual enlightenment, or simply a deeper understanding of the teachings of one of history's most influential leaders, this channel is for you. Join us as we embark on a journey of knowledge and inspiration straight from the sacred texts of Nahjul Balagha. Subscribe to stay updated with weekly content, including sermons, letters, and sayings of Imam Ali, along with their meanings and practical applications in our lives.
I remember that about 18 years ago, while discussing the exegesis of certain verses of the Holy Quran in a private gathering, for the first time the point struck me that the Holy Quran very often employs typical expressions about a certain group of human beings, such as those who lose, forget, or sell their selves. For instance, it says the following: they have indeed lost their selves as souls, and that which they were forging has gone astray from them. The Quran 70:53 say, surely the losers are they who lose their selves and their families on the day of resurrection. Quran 39:15, be not as those who forgot Allah, and so He caused them to forget their selves. Those they are the ungodly. Quran 50:19, the question might occur to a mind with a philosophic bent. Is it possible for a man to lose his self? The loss of anything necessitates two things, the loser and the thing lost. Now how is it possible for a human being to lose himself? Is this not self-contradictory? Likewise, is it possible for a man to forget himself? A living human being is always immersed in itself and perceives everything as something other and additional to its own self. Its attention is, before everything else, focused on itself. Then what is meant by forgetting oneself? Later I realized that this matter occupies a significant place in Islamic teachings, especially in the prayers and some traditions, as well as in the writings of Muslim
Erecting the house on his own land,
it shows that often man mistakes a non-self as his belongs to someone else, as his real while his own plot lies abandoned
imagining the
elsewhere.
non-self
Don't
to be
build your
self.
house
He
on
treats
the land
the
of
non-self
another.
and takes
Work
care
for
of it
your
as he
own
would
self
have treated
and toil
one
not
yet
for
for
his
his
true
true
self.
self.
Who is the
true
stranger
self,
except
as
your
a
own
result,
earthen frame,
falls into
on whose
neglect,
account all
oblivion,
your
and
sorrows
occasionally
and woes.
undergoes a metamorphosis.
So long as you nurse and
For
pamper your
instance,
body, the
when
soul
man
would
imagines
not
his
prosper,
body as
nor
representative
would
of
it
his
bestow
total
plenty.
entity,
All his endeavor revolves around
the
his
following
body.
you.
It means that
who
he
has
has lost
forgotten
yourself
himself
and losing
conceiving the
encounter,
non-self,
distinguishing not the other from your own true
Such a
self.
man,
At
in the
every
words of
shadow
Rumi,
you are
is like
quick
the one
to
who
exclaim,
owns a piece of
this
land
is me.
somewhere. He
By
carries
Allah, it is
building
not you.
materials and hires
Isolate
masons
yourself for a
or
while
workers
from the
to build a
crowd
house for him.
and immerse yourself to the
After
neck
much
and top.
toil, the house
Indeed, you
is
shall
made
find
ready
that
for
you are
living.
one with the one.
The doors
Beautiful.
and windows
serene
are
and blessed
painted,
is
the
yourself.
floor is carpeted,
Amir al-Mu'minin
curtains are hung,
Aliyah
and the house
has a
is
saying in
furnished
this regard
beautifully
which
in
is as
every way.
profound as it is
However, one
elegant.
day,
I wonder
when he
at the
prepares to
man
move
who
into the
searches
new
for his
house,
lost,
all of a
thinks
sudden
but doesn't
he
care to
realizes
recover
his
his
mistake
lost
to
self.
his
Dismay,
soul.
he notes that instead of losing oneself and forgetting oneself is not confined to man's error in recognizing his true identity and essence, such as the ordinary man's self-identification with the body, or the Arif's occasional identification of himself with his Barzaki body. We have said in the last chapter that actually every being in the natural course of its development moves from the self to the self. That is, it moves from a lower, weaker self to a self which is powerful and higher. Accordingly, the deviation of every existent from the path of its perfection and development is the deviation from the self towards the non-self. Man, more than any other creature, being endowed with a free will and the freedom of choice, is subject to this deviation. By choosing a deviant objective as ultimate for himself, in reality he replaces his true self with the non-self, mistaking the non-self to be the self. It is on this basis that the human being's total immersion in material aspects of life has been regarded as condemnable. Therefore, the adoption of devious goals and ends is one of the factors of self-alienation that leads man to forget his true self and finally to lose it. Devious goals and objectives not only result in the disease of self-loss, they ultimately lead to the metamorphosis of man's human essence, a metamorphosis that is determined by that particular devious goal. A significant part of Islamic teachings is devoted to drive home the point that on the day of resurrection, every human being shall be resurrected together with the object of his love. Our traditions declare the following unequivocally: everyone, on the day of judgment, shall be resurrected in the company of his object of love, whatever that may be, even if it is a stone. With attention to the indubitable and unequivocal Islamic teaching that on the day of judgment, man will be resurrected in the form of what he acquired in this world, it becomes clear that the reason for a person's resurrection together with the objects of his love is that the love and attachment for that object make it the ultimate goal of the path of his becoming. However devious that object may be, it causes the soul and the inner reality of a person to transform into it. This subject has been given a great attention by Muslim sages and philosophers who have made great many interesting observations in this regard. For brevity's sake, we shall quote only one rubai on this topic. The seeker of a mine of diamonds is himself a mine. The seeker of the spirit is himself the spirit. I will divulge the secret of this matter. You are whatever you seek. You are the object of your quest. Discovery of the self and of Allah, the rediscovery of the self, in addition to the above two, requires to fulfill one more condition, the realization and knowledge of the cause of one's creation and existence. That is to say, it is impossible for man to recognize himself and know himself by viewing himself in separation from the cause of his creation. The real cause of every existent is prior to it and nearer to it than it is to its own elf. And we are nearer to him than 50t16, and know that Allah stands between a man and his heart. Quran 80:24. The Muslim mystics have laid a great emphasis on the point that the knowledge of the self, Marifat al-Nafs, and the knowledge of Allah, Marifat Allah, are not separate from one another. To experience the spirit, which according to the Holy Quran is Allah's breath, is to experience the divine essence. Muslim mystics have raised severe objections against the statements of other Muslim philosophers regarding the problem of self-knowledge and consider them to be inadequate. Sheikh Mahmud al-Shabastari was sent a series of diverse questions by someone from Khorasan. His poem Gulshan-e-Raz is the reply which he gave to those questions. In one of the asks, "Who am I? Inform me about myself. What is meant by a journey within thyself?" The Sheikh's reply is elaborate. There, he says the following forms and spirits from the same light are derived, reflected of mirror or beaming from the lamp. Ai, the word, is everywhere in all your speech. It refers to the soul, the spirit. I warned, are greater than the body and the spirit, which are together parts of the self. Go then, my good man, first know well yourself, and remember edema is different from robustness. Pot 100, leave one of them, to soar over the undulations of space and time. Abandon the world in order to become a world in yourself. A further elaboration of this theme will take us outside the scope of our present discussion. To be brief, it should be said that the gnosis of the self is inseparable from that of Allah. This is exactly the meaning of the famous saying of the Prophet and the same theme recurs in the 100th reference to the famous words of Ibn al-Arabi about one who imagines to have known the mysteries of the self through the statement of the philosophers. Recorded statements of Imam Ali. He who knows his own self knows. In Nahjul Balagha, it is reported that Imam Ali, somebody, "Hey, have you seen your God?" Ali Spak was asked by replied, "Would I worship what I have not seen?" Then he elaborated on his answer thus, "He is not visible to the eyes, but the hearts perceive him through the factual experience of faith." Iman. Ho 1. An interesting point that is implicit in the verses of the Holy Quran is that man is in possession of himself as long as he possesses Allah. Only through the remembrance of Allah does he remember his self and become fully aware of it. To forget Allah is to neglect one's own self. Forgetting Allah is accompanied by self-forgetfulness. Be not as those who forgot Allah, so he caused them to forget their own selves as souls. Quran 50:19. Rumi, following the verses quoted above, says the following: "Even if the body should lie amidst fragrance and musk, on death it will petrify and give out its stink. So scent not the body, but perfume the soul with musk. What is such musk but the name of the glorious Master?" Hafiz says the following: Hafiz, if you desire presence, do not be absent from him. If you desire his rendezvous, abandon the world and forget it. This shows why the remembrance of Allah is essential for the life of the heart. It awakens and illumines the heart and gives peace to the soul. It revives, purifies, refines and humbles the human conscience and fills it with delight. How profound and beautiful are Ali's words in Nahjul Balagha, where he says the following: "Certainly Allah Almighty has made his remembrance a means for cleaning and polishing the hearts. It makes them hear after deafness, see after blindness, and it makes them submissive to guidance after being stubborn and resisting. In all periods and times when there were no prophets, there were individuals to whom he whispered through their thoughts and spoke to their intellects. As a result, they were enlightened with an awakening in their hearts. Vision and hearing 102, worship and rediscovery of the self. There's so much that can be said about worship that if we were to elaborate, we would have to devote scores of chapters to this subject. Here, we shall make a brief reference to the value of worship in the rediscovery of the self. As much as the bondage to material matters and immersion in them severs man from his true self and induces self-alienation, worship helps him in recovering his own self. Worship awakens man from his spiritual slumber. It rescues him from drowning in the sea of self-neglect and forgetfulness and saves his identity from being lapsed in the world of material things. It is in the mirror of worship and Allah's remembrance that man can observe himself as he really is and become aware of his failings and faults. It is in worship that he acquires the true perspective of being, life, space and time, like watching a city from a high mountain, and perceives the insignificance, petness and abjectness of his materialistic hopes, desires and ambitions. It is in worship that a yearning is awakened in his heart to attain to the very core of being. I have always marveled at the following words of the famous scientist of our age, Albert Einstein. What adds to my amazement is that he was a physicist and a mathematician, not a psychologist, theologian or philosopher. After dividing religion into 3 stages, he calls the 3rd stage of religious experience as the one arising from cosmic religious feeling. He describes this religious experience in these words: individual feels the futility of human desires and aims, and the sublimity and marvelous order which reveal themselves both in nature and in the world of thought. Individual existence impresses him as a sort of prison, and he wants to experience the universe as a single significant whole. 103 William James, writing about prayer, says the following: the impulse to pray is a necessary consequence of the fact that, while the innermost of the empirical selves of a man is a self of the social sort, it yet can find its only adequate socius, its great companion in an ideal world. Most men, either continually or occasionally, carry a reference to it in their breasts. The humblest outcast on this earth can feel himself to be real and valid by means of this higher recognition. Point 104. Iqbal also has something profound to say about worship and prayer and their value for the rediscovery of the self. He writes the following: prayer as a means of spiritual illumination is a normal vital act by which the island of our personality suddenly discovers its situation in a larger whole of life. 105. We conclude our discussion of this extensive subject right here. Some relevant issues now that our discussion about the concept of the world, dunya, in Nahjul Balagha is nearing its conclusion. I want to clarify some issues with attention to the principles discussed above. Life in this world versus in the hereafter. Some Islamic traditions seem to imply that there exists a kind of conflict between the world and the hereafter. For instance, it is stated that they are like two rival wives who can never be reconciled, or it is said they are like the east and the west, one cannot approach any of them without moving farther from the other. How should one interpret these statements in order to reconcile them with what has been said above? The answer is that, firstly, as has been expressly stated in most Islamic traditions, a reconciliation between winning the world and the hereafter is not only possible but is a necessity of the Islamic creed. That which is impossible is their reconciliation as ultimate ends and goals. The enjoyment of the good things of the world does not necessarily require deprivation from the blessings of the hereafter. That which deprives one of the rewards of the next life is a series of mortal sins, not the enjoyment of a wholesome, comfortable life and the availing of pure and lawful bounties provided by Allah. Similarly, that which leads to deprivation in the world is not taqwa or righteous deeds or the endeavor for the hereafter. A number of other factors are responsible for it. Many prophets, imams and pious believers whose virtues and piety are indubitable have been among those who benefited greatly from the legitimate bounties of the world. Accordingly, even if it is assumed that the religious texts do imply irreconcilability between the enjoyment of the world and that of the hereafter, they would not be acceptable because of the incontrovertible testimony to the contrary. Secondly, if we scrutinize such traditions closely, an interesting point comes to the surface in whose light we observe no contradiction between them and the incontrovertible principles of Islam. But before this point is explained, we should examine three possible relationships between the world and the hereafter. The relationship between enjoyment of the good things of the world and enjoyment of the rewards of the hereafter. The relationship between the world as the ultimate goal and the hereafter as such. The relationship between adoption of one of these as the ultimate goal with the enjoyment of the other. There is no conflict whatsoever involved in the first case. Accordingly, a reconciliation between the two is quite possible. The second case, however, involves a contradiction. There is no possibility of reconciling these two opposite goals. As to the third, it involves in turn two cases. First, the adoption of the world as the ultimate end and the enjoyment of the hereafter. Second, the adoption of the hereafter as the ultimate goal and the enjoyment of the world. The first case involves a contradiction, whereas the second does not. The primary and the secondary, the conflict between the adoption of either the world or the hereafter as ultimate ends and the enjoyment of the other is the kind that exists between a perfect and an imperfect end. If the imperfect is made the ultimate goal, the perfect is necessarily missed, whereas if the perfect were one's end and goal, it would not necessarily preclude the imperfect. The same is true of anything primary in relationship to its secondaries. If something secondary were made as the aim, it would result in deprivation from the primary. But if the primary is made the aim and the goal, the secondary being a corollary of the primary is automatically included. This is most eloquently explained in Hikmah 269 of Nahjul Balagha.